Oh, okay.
1 o'clock at
I used to work
which is
I used
fantastic.
to go through.
And we have lots of people in the room. So welcome everybody. First, I will read the ethics statements. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. Anyone have any conflict? Hearing none, do we have any public comment? No public comment. Next is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. We do have one addition to the consent agenda, and it is, I'll let Tristan explain.
Yes, so we got this at 11:35 this morning. So we just got this off the printer about 20 or so minutes ago. But one thing that we've been working with NCDOT on is applying for a grant to provide more electric vehicle charging throughout Western North Carolina. This is roughly a repeat of a grant that was pursued last year, and there's a little bit of history that I'll try to just touch on. But as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's a couple of big programs promoting electric vehicle infrastructure. And one of those is NEVI, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. One thing that we've noted as an NPO in coordination with some of our other RPOs is that the corridors that NCDOT has identified for NEVI funding essentially stop at Asheville. There's a little bit of I-40 going west into Tennessee that's part of the program, but the rest of the western part of the state is not covered by that program. So we've been working with DOT on trying to find other sources to promote electric vehicle infrastructure. The other program is the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure, or CFI, and that's another federal grant program. So the project that's being developed would look at providing charging infrastructure in areas basically Waynesville and further to the west. So the project would be led by the Southwestern RPO, which is based out of Silva, but look at basically Waynesville in our region, as well as Marshall and Brevard in the Land Sky RPO, and then a number of sites further to the west. Because we know we have a lot of folks coming from Atlanta, South Carolina, and other places trying to access sites in the western part of our state that as of right now don't have funding identified for electric infrastructure. So what's been requested is a letter of support for this grant application, and that is what we are planning to add to the consent agenda today.
Any questions? As we know, there, yes.
Is this, are they applying as like a direct, or are they passed through to NCDOT?
I believe it would be a pass-through to NCDOT. Don't quote me on that. After Southwestern said they would take responsibility for leading the grant, I said, great. But that's something I can follow up with Rose at Southwestern.
Okay, yeah, because there have been some concerns through NCDOT about the CFI grant, so that's why I was wondering, because it's not like a traditional grant where you go through, you know, design, right away, all that stuff. So I think it's about like the local programs office figuring out how they can sort of make it work.
The good thing is I think that there's already sites that were identified in the last request that we made.
Right.
Okay.
I think that we're ahead of the game.
Okay.
Identifying locations.
Okay. Well, as long as like they've spoken to NCDOT and they've agreed, yes, we will be the pass-through. I think that's the most important thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So NCDOT has hired a consultant for the grant application and has done a lot of legwork up to this point. But I guess the feedback that they received is that an NPO or RPO could be a more competitive application for this process. One thing I forgot to mention that's kind of an important contrast from last time. Last time there was an identified partner for match and sites, that was Ingalls. This time the strategy is more to try to get the grant and then have them go through an RFQ process to identify local partners that would be willing to provide match and sites for the project. So it very well might end up being Ingalls again, but to me, I think that allows a more competitive process and opens it up a bit more.
Thank you. Another question?
I brought it up during like a previous, I think, update about like the changes with CFI and how it affects the state. So with the state, private entities are unable to provide the match because it's a different type of contracting, alternate contracting method. And speaking with NCDOT and Marta Matthews, I think she said the route that would have to be taken would be for the recipient to provide the match.
So we need to pull this off the consent for the items so we can keep talking.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to, before you submit it, before it's submitted. Okay, I'm sorry.
So I'll actually request a motion to approve the agenda and the consent agenda with the addition of item 4 to be the support for the grant application.
So moved. Second.
And Kim has politely asked her hand raised.
Yes, Kim. Before we vote.
Yeah, before we vote on the consent agenda, which includes item C, the 5307 rescission of Buncombe County allocation of transit funds to the city of Asheville, I just wanted to make a point here that we've needed partnership in the region to advance our transit planning and services. And I take this as a good sign. I'm hearing from a lot of partners with our ARTC coalition. It includes like our local AARP. And when we see the opportunity to partner for better service to South Asheville on the Hendersonville Road corridor to Inca Candler, and seeing the county name that explicitly in the rescission of the funds, I'm encouraged, and I think it's a good sign of partnership. That I just wanted to put a little bit of sunshine on here at the MPO level, so it didn't just slip by.
Thank you. Kim, we need all the sunshine we can get most days. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. So
I just want to confirm that Shannon, you moved and Kevin seconded.
Yes.
This is a request from ASHA. Moving forward, could everybody say their name before they first and second? Because we've had a couple recordings where it's a little difficult to hear.
Yeah, and with Asha's out sick today, so with her doing minutes via recording, that's especially helpful for her.
So we need some mumble war, is that what Okay. Okay, so we had first and a second, so roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Fertiller.
Aye.
BOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Jim
Aye.
9-2. We're not available to take the call at the moment, so leave us a brief message.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Haywood County, Brandon Rogers.
Over at.
Aye.
I want to give you guys a call. I've got that transmission.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Girl Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wexel.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Mike Eveland.
Aye. Come on in.
Shannon Dawn.
Aye.
Lawn Street, Tom Whitmer.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
Weaverville, Catherine Cordell.
Aye.
And Woodson, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
Did I miss anyone?
Did y'all get rain, Rogers?
I did.
You did. Could you hear? Okay. Yeah, okay, thanks.
So you'll also notice that we have a new video today that we're trying out. We have an Allen for those people online so they can see who's talking. So it'll zoom into you so they can see instead of being little ants at the end of the room. So hopefully this will work out and we can continue to use this. So next on the agenda is the support for the grant application for the CFI.
Suzette, I think if it's helpful with your concerns and points, you know, I can certainly link you up with I think it's Heather Hildebrand with DOT and the grant leader and Rose at Southwestern RPO.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any reason with not supporting. I think we just got to get the logistics figured out and what the state, legislation figured out. So we're not doing things that we can't do.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like worst case scenario, then we might have to change the sponsor of the application from Southwestern RPO to NCDOT.
Yeah, and pretty much that's what we've had to do actually for City of Durham actually. So we originally planned it to be pass-through, but when we discovered the changes, it's actually now all funding is coming directly to NCDOT now. So just because of these legislation, yeah. But we'll figure it out.
Okay, we can help with that coordination.
Yeah.
Any more questions about the grant? I know you put it up there, so hopefully everyone has time to read it. So I'll entertain a motion to support the request.
Larry Harris, so moved.
Thank you, Larry.
Jennifer Hensley, second.
Jennifer. At least it was a Hensley kid, Kevin. That's the age, yeah. I mean, it's close to the age, yeah. Okay, let's take a roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Pertiller.
Aye.
DOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady. Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Jim Player.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Haywood County, Brandon Rogers.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lashley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wexel.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Mike Evelyn.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gahn.
Aye.
Montreat, Tom Widmer.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. And Woodson, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Perfect, thank you. Next is business items. First is the P7 final assignment of regional impact points, and we've had lots of discussions about these, so.
But yeah, every so often we have a round of prioritization where someone says at the very end that this is the first thing they've heard about it. That's not on us, folks. We are going to meeting this thing to death. And do we have a help meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so, but this is very important, so we do want to go over this yet again. So just as
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry.
While he's doing that, I would like to say that we have had lots of discussions about this, but we also, from the prioritization on a couple of items, really would like input from the full board. because I think it's going to impact a lot of different areas. I think we need the input from the full board and not just the prioritization and getting a rubber stamp from the NPO.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder, the prioritization process that we're talking about today, where does that sit in the overall planning process? That essentially serves as the bridge between our long-range transportation plans that identify needs and determining what actually gets funded. So we're trying to figure out what transportation projects should be funded next. There's a number of general steps in this process. The first is figuring out what projects as a region we want to submit and have considered. We did that last fall. Those projects go through and receive what's called a quantitative score. That's a score based on congestion, safety, economic development, and other factors. From there, statewide mobility projects or programs, we'll get a little bit into that. And then the next step where we are at right now is determining what regional impact projects receive local input points. So, going back a little bit, the way the prioritization process works is governed by the Strategic Transportation Investment Act in 2012. That is a law that essentially determines how the state is going to distribute transportation funding across the entire state. So it splits up transportation funds into 3 different buckets, and we'll go through those. The first bucket is statewide mobility. That is the largest bucket in terms of funding. That gets 40% of transportation funds in this process. And for us, the eligible projects are on interstates or US 2374 in Haywood County, which is considered a strategic highway corridor, and also the Asheville Regional Airport is eligible. Projects compete across the entire state, so all of our projects in this tier are competing with Charlotte, Raleigh, Wilmington, etc. Anywhere across the state with an eligible project. And projects are selected 100% based on the quantitative score. There's no local input point consideration at this tier. And to point out, we've already been made aware that we did not receive any new projects in this round of prioritization in this funding tier. The next tier that we're talking about today is regional impact. Overall, the regional impact tier receives 30% of the funding, and then that is further distributed to 7 different regions based on population. So our region, Region G, as you see below, is made up of the counties in NCDOT's divisions 13 and 14. And that region has the second smallest population of any of the regions in North Carolina. So we receive the second smallest proportion of funding in this tier. The eligible projects are primarily projects on US or NC routes. Projects are scored 70% based on quantitative scores and 30% based on local input points from MPOs, RPOs, and NCDOT divisions. And to point out, other eligible projects are statewide projects that aren't funded that we may cascade. Jen, you have your hand raised?
I do. How often are the regional impact population updated?
That's a great question. I believe that's updated every couple of years, but I will reach out to DOT to confirm when they update those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just pinned our video and tried to now flip.
That's okay. Oh, so I'm not, people can't see my screen.
There we go.
Okay, all right, perfect. The next tier is division needs. That is also receives 30% of funding. That's further split up into the 14 different NCDOT divisions. And to point out, funds are split equally across the 14 divisions, which is somewhat advantageous for us, given a lower population. So the eligible projects are secondary roads, bicycle and pedestrian projects. So to point out, I've gotten a lot of questions about why aren't we putting points on bike ped projects. We're not talking about division needs projects today. That'll be in October and November. Also transit projects, but we can also consider cascading any projects that aren't funded in those other two tiers. And projects are scored 50% based on the quantitative score, 50% based on local input. And projects compete across each division. So Division 13 projects compete across the geography as shown, and Division 14 for Haywood and Henderson for us compete with that geography. But to make clear, the only one we're really talking about today is the regional impact funding tier. Just to go through how the local input points impact things overall. So with regional impact, 70% of the score comes from that quantitative score. 15% comes from local input points from the MPO, and 15% from NCDOT divisions. So if we have a project that scores a 50 on its quantitative score, we can put local input points on and boost the score by 15. If NCDOT does the same, it boosts the score by another 15, and our project scores 80. If there are local government concerns about these projects, then the way that we're able to address that would be simply not putting points on the project, and that would decrease the score and make it less competitive. But overall in this process, NCDOT looks at scores at the end of this, and the higher scoring projects have a better chance of being funded. But speaking of better chance of being funded, let's talk about funding for a second. Based on the updated projections, and these projections are getting a little bit aged at this point, are the amount of projected funding to be available in this next STIF through 2035 is currently sitting at negative $191 million. So generally what that means is that it is extremely unlikely that we will get new projects funded in this round of prioritization without some kind of funding change happening. And really what we'll be looking at will be our next business item, which is what projects do we really want to try to keep on schedule, and what do we want to think about delaying and potentially having decommitted. But that is, we'll get more into that in the next business item. So going back to local input points, how the MPO determines what projects are recommended to receive points is based on our methodology. I won't go through all of the different things that we score, but this is based on the goals from our 25-year transportation plan and criteria that we have developed over years and years. So the output from our methodology is available online. You can see the projects that scored higher or lower and why projects scored the way they did. Also, as a reminder, we did have a public survey that went out in April and May. We got more than 1,700 responses from across the region. Transylvania County continues to shine with our transportation surveys, but Buncombe and Henderson not too far behind. In terms of the most positively received projects, to note, the #1 project was the passenger rail project between Salisbury and Asheville. That received the greatest ratio of positive to negative votes. Following that was Section C of the I-26 connector, and #3 was the Richland Creek Greenway in Waynesville. The least positively received projects, and I would say it wasn't even negative, barely 50-50. That was the widening of I-40 in Buncombe County from Montevideo to Wiggins, the intersection of Howard Gap Road and Tracy Grove Road, and the Peachtree Road extension between Hendersonville Road and Sweet Creek Road. We got, at least, that number 3 project, we got to work on getting folks on board with that one.
Chris,
Yep.
can you go back? So I don't understand the widening, number 1, on least positive projects, because that's badly needed. For people that use that, I mean,
It was like a half and half.
what is it?
For us, we seem to need every single day.
Yeah. Anyway, I just
People
wanted
that don't drive through there, Kevin, that they
Yeah,
don't,
well-
they don't understand why that project is needed so much.
every time you drive through there, you know, rush hour, it's bumper to bumper till you get to the way station.
Not even rush hour anymore.
Right.
It's pretty awesome.
That's exactly.
Leaf season, you know, I mean, you know.
Weekends.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just want.
Any day that ends in Y.
Yeah.
It's out there.
That's like, yeah, I mean, Kevin, to your point, you know, some data that we can share is we try to track the overall hours of delay being experienced by county.
Yeah.
And Haywood County, basically primarily the I-40 corridor, has been experiencing more overall delays than Buncombe County in a number of recent months. So, to your point, yeah, we can see congestion is definitely becoming an issue. There.
The other part of it is there weren't enough Haywood County residents that responded to that survey. I mean,
Great point.
53.
I mean, you know, we weren't much better. I'm not throwing darts at you because we barely, Madison County barely beat you, brother, but I'm just saying, I mean, you know, our people can't really complain too much when they don't participate in the process.
Well, you know, it's almost like if I could put that in a local paper, I think it'd been a different result.
I think we need to, you and I from the diet, make points about that next go around. To get one there.
The next time, put it in the local paper so that you can get people to go on and answer the survey.
We did advertise in the Mountain Express. That's the regional paper that's mentioned in the public involvement plan. So we did that as well as online promotion. But yeah, I mean, I think to the chair's point, honestly, one of the most effective things we see right now is local government promotion of these surveys. I will continue to point out that Flat Rock must have the most popular newsletter in Western North Carolina. Every time that newsletter goes out, we see a spike in responses. And the more and more I think we can get that from across the region, I think the greater is in.
Yeah, I think that's actually.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Ann.
And it needs to say exit 27, not 36.
To the projects that are being recommended for local input points, this went through the prioritization subcommittee, and then the TCC and board last month, and has come back through for prioritization subcommittee, TCC and board approval. So, what is on the docket for local input points? The number 1 project is 1923 Smoky Park Highway in Buncombe County. That's between I-40 and NC 151. That is a high-growth corridor that was identified in the Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan for more growth. The current volume to capacity ratio is already over capacity, and the safety record is not great. So that is the number 1 project. Just to point out, I feel like we kind of brush over what's actually being recommended, so I'll try to talk somewhat briefly about that. These top 3 projects are referred to as access management projects. So to make clear what's being recommended to move forward as a project, really at the heart of it would be adding a median and doing access management along the corridor. There are times where I hear back from people that the only reason we have medians is because we want to make it harder for them to make a left turn. The main thing that we see is that based on federal research or national research, Access management along corridors reduces fatal and injury crashes by 25 to 31%. That's fantastic. And also to note, adding those medians, doing that access management can also give a slight boost to capacity and improve traffic flow. Yes.
Before you go, can you go back one slide?
Absolutely.
And I know there's probably no way to figure this out, but that volume capacity of the 1.35, I would be curious to know how many of those excess cars are because of the I-40 issue. I mean, you know, the survey is really kind of, it's bipolar almost, because they're saying this road is overloaded, but the survey responses indicated that the I-40 project wasn't a priority, but this is a priority. Well, the problem is when I-40 gets backed up, everybody goes to that road.
Yep. Right.
And so, I mean, you know, I don't know if the survey, this is a matter of who responded, or if maybe the questions of the survey weren't, that just doesn't add up. That the one project would be one of the lowest projects, and then this one would be one of the highest projects, because they kind of go hand in glove. Anyway, I digress.
It's a business discussion. Okay. All right, good deal. Ad nauseam. All right. Sorry.
Captain Obvious here, sorry.
No, I love it. Yeah, the full board hasn't heard that.
No, that's a good point. But yeah, I mean, in general, this is an area that's experiencing a lot of high growth. This is one of the fastest growing parts of not just Buncombe County, but our entire region. And again, identified in the Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan as a high growth area. And yeah, we do have the Liberty Road new interchange project that would hopefully alleviate some of this, but given the growth pressures, that's likely to continue. But with what's being proposed, you know, the median access management is kind of the heart of it. Not shown in this picture would be intersection improvements to address bottlenecks as well as intersection safety along this corridor, and also adding some of the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. To note, this corridor specifically had 11 pedestrian crashes, 2 bicyclist crashes, 2 of which were fatal, 2 resulted in serious injuries. So an area that's seeing quite a bit of bike ped safety issues. The second corridor is US 25 Hendersonville Road in South Buncombe County. The stretch is between NC 146 or Long Shoals Road and NC 280 Airport Road. That's another area that's experienced a ton of growth. That's actually the fastest growing part of our region over the last 20 years. Volume to capacity, again, another corridor already over capacity. If you drive it, you would believe it. Also, pretty not great safety record, and relatively well received in terms of the public survey. And again, that would be an access management project. Overall cost being estimated is a little over $130 million. The third project is in Henderson County. It's another access management project on Spartanburg Highway. That's another area that's been experiencing a lot of growth. Not quite over capacity, but there's certainly times of day when their congestion is an issue, and safety is certainly an identified issue. That was slightly well received in the public survey, 39% positive, 31% negative. And the estimated cost for that is a little over $121 million. So those are the 3 access management projects, and those were the 3 highest scoring projects based on the MPO's methodology. And then for geographic equity, we also recommended 1 project from Haywood and 1 project from Madison on the highway side. The Haywood project is US 1923, the Asheville Highway and Park Street corridor going from Chestnut Mountain Road over to NC 215 on the other side of downtown Canton. That project is, it was submitted as a modernization, so not an access management. It was quite well received in the public survey. The estimated cost is about $40 million. Just to note, this one's a little bit more complicated. In terms of modernization, really at the heart of that project, what we're talking about is bringing the road up to standards. This is a long corridor. It serves as a relief valve a lot of times for I-40. And so bringing the road up to standards is one of the key things. To note, there's not a default design out there that really fits the current design of the project, which would keep a lot of the climbing lane section, but also not shown intersection improvements. One key thing that I know the Haywood County Greenway Council has talked about a lot is the multi-use path connection over to Chestnut Mountain Park and the other 1923 project. This project it goes through a lot of different contexts. One of the other parts would be looking at Park Street through downtown Canton, looking to try to add some potential green infrastructure elements, reduce speeds through downtown Canton by looking at reducing one of the travel lanes. It's 3 lanes one way through downtown Canton right now, reducing that to 2 lanes one way to kind of fit the cross section, at least on the west side, and adding that bike ped connection through the heart of downtown, and also addressing the intersection on the west side of downtown, which, as you can see, is not your typical 4-way intersection. So I think what's been proposed through there would be more of a roundabout to help with traffic flow and serve as a gateway into downtown Canton.
How does the bike ped thing work with on-street parking? How do you accommodate both?
So that's something that would have to be looked into more. So there's actually a few different design alternatives out there. This one would be one of the most impactful. That would likely remove a lot of the on-street parking, but there's other alternatives out there that would be less impactful and leave more space.
Fortunately, that section, the businesses are all there.
Yeah.
The Madison County project is NC 213 or Cascade Street. That goes from Athletic Street to Bone Camp Road. That's the named road in the region. That is a project again, looking at areas where we are anticipating a lot of growth. There's water and sewer going in along that corridor. We're anticipating more growth. We submitted this for access management, so a little bit of a different cross-section than some of the others. So maintaining 2 lanes, but adding a median, especially with the number of driveways through there and some of the crash history, and providing a side path to provide some of those bike ped connections in areas where there's more growth anticipated. And to note, the Mars Hill Park is a little bit to the south of this corridor, but could benefit from the connection. So those are the highway projects being recommended to receive local input points. The non-highway projects being recommended would be the Western North Carolina Passenger Rail Project. So that is the section from Salisbury to Asheville. What's being requested would be $131 million, which would essentially serve as the match for additional federal grants if awarded to implement passenger rail along the corridor. Again, this was the most well-received project in terms of our public survey. It scored quite well. It was the 9th highest scoring project in the region. But one thing you might note in your packet is we're only talking about applying 15 points, while the other projects would receive 100. Just really quick on that, the reason is we're only allowed to apply points that correlate with the percentage of how much of the project is in our region. So this project, 15% of it is in the MPO, so we can only assign 15 points. The rest relies on Foothills, RPO, Greater Hickory MPO, the Charlotte MPO or CRTPO, and the Cabarrus Rowan MPO. And One of the changes from June that has been requested in coordination with Charlotte is that their methodology doesn't allow them to put local input points on this project, but they said if we were willing to donate points, they would assign those for this project. So the one addition would be putting 14 additional points, so a total of 29 points onto the passenger rail project. So overall, those are the 6 projects that we're recommending receive local input points for this round. A couple of things to note is that with all of these projects, we're talking about $554 million and $100,000 worth of projects. And as a reminder, we have negative $191 million available. So really, we're talking about stating the region's priorities, and let's not get our hopes too high on funding for this round. Also to note is we have 1,900 points to use. With what's being recommended, we would only use 529 of those, so we would be leaving a lot of points on the table. But in our discussions, it goes back to the funding. Would it make sense for us to put points on $1 billion worth of projects with negative 191 available? I think, you know, in general, if we're saying everything's a priority, then in a lot of ways, nothing's a priority. And so that's the reasoning for that. But I will stop talking at this point and open it up for discussion.
Also note that adding those 14 points for Charlotte really will not hurt us because we have additional points available. If we were very high, we would not be generous with our points.
Right, we're not taking points away from any other project, we're going to give them those, which would be my concern. So
correct.
We're not doing that.
Yeah, we're not doing it. We still have close to 900 points. And that's
About over 1,300
points.
I wish that rail project could come to Waynesville, all the way to Waynesville, but I guess you checked into that, hadn't you? Okay.
Yes, but I think it's still working on, right?
Y'all can have it.
No, we are definitely working on that because there is also a project to bring light rail or rail from Henderson County to Asheville, and we're looking at something similar for Haywood County as well.
I can cut down on traffic on the roads too, you know, potentially.
Definitely. I would take a train to Asheville.
Yeah.
For work.
Yeah.
So, open up for any other discussion for this, any questions? I'm sure everyone's saving all their questions for the next item. Any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the local point assignment and donation as presented.
I just wanted to confirm that we're handling 4B separately from this for a discussion.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. So this is just for 4A, this is for the approval of local point assignment and donation as presented. And the motion to approve. Larry Harris made a motion. First motion. Second.
Matt West.
Asheville, Kimroni.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Portiller.
Aye.
BOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady. Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Wet Rock, Ian Coletta.
Aye.
Richard, Jim Players.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Haywood County, Brandon Rogers.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall. Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wexel.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Mike Evelyn.
Aye.
Jules River, Shannon John.
Aye.
One Street, Tom Widmer.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
Cedarville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. And Woodson, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Perfect. Next, we're going to go to the rankings of existing STIP projects. And I think this one will have a lot of discussion. Hopefully. We have discussed this over and over. So this is the one I really do want your input on.
Yeah, so, this is, something that is, the first thing I want to point out is this is something that's relatively new. This is not something we normally do. And so, I just wanted to point out that, sorry for the basic graphics, but again, new thing, we'll refine graphics if it keeps up. But in general, agreed. But how we develop new tips and steps, and this is really what we're talking about. We're talking about developing the 2026 through 2035 tip and step. In general, the way that's developed is projects that are existing, that are under development, go into the new tip and step. We don't usually talk about those very much when we're developing these documents. Really what we spend most of our time talking about are potential new projects and how those go through prioritization. That's the general way that's been done. What is new this time is that we are talking about these existing projects, and the way that we've been requested to do so is through project rankings, and ranking our existing projects by funding tier. This was a request made by NCDOT in late June, and we have a due date of the end of the month to rank these projects. So a relatively quick turnaround. To note, to me, ideally we wouldn't have to do this, to the chair's point, but I do think that given the issue, this is actually a very positive step in terms of collaborative planning and decision making.
I think this comes from the last time where they just cut things, did it themselves, and got no input. I think this is a better way of saying, please help us. Or give us some input.
Yeah, to me, this is a very good step. Wish we didn't have to do it, but since we do, it's a good step for a collaborative process. No, please do. Again, this goes back to the funding projections that have been put out by NCDOT. As we talked about, Region G is at negative 191 million, but that's not the only funding bucket that has a negative balance. There are areas outside of our region with negative balances. The Division 13 funding tier has a balance of negative 52 million. Division 14 has a balance of 51 million. In terms of transportation funds, 51, I'll take a positive balance to be clear. But in terms of overall funding and transportation, that's one, maybe two updated cost estimates away from going from the black to the red. So it's not a very large positive number. But in general, given that this process is looking at very constrained funding and increasing costs, what NCDOT has determined is that in areas where there is a positive funding balance, they will continue to go through the prioritization process and select new projects for those unallocated funds to be programmed for. But in areas with negative balances, really what we're talking about is trying to balance NCDOT's budget, and doing so either through delays to projects and pushing them further out in the schedule, and potentially looking at decommitting transportation projects. There's, to the chair's point, this is not the ideal way to develop a new tip and step. What was requested is that all MPOs and RPOs and DOT divisions come up with a ranking of projects. For the regional impact tier and division needs tiers. We coordinated with the prioritization subcommittee on how we should do that. And for Region G projects, that went through the prioritization subcommittee and then the TCC and today the board. The Division 13 and 14 projects, we convened meetings with local stakeholders, and that fed into the prioritization subcommittee and then the TCC and board. So that's been our general process for developing this list. And so I want to go through our Division 13 and 14 lists somewhat quickly before we jump into our Region G ranking list. So 1 second. All right, so Division 13 had a total of 8 projects listed, technically 9, but one project didn't have funds, so it doesn't really count. The number 1 project recommended was the Mills Gap Road project in Buncombe County. Well, all of these are in Buncombe County for Division 13. Mills Gap Road, the primary reason being that right-of-way has already been acquired. This project is very far along in development, I think the general reasoning is, especially after you've acquired property, maintaining that as a priority is key. The second project being recommended is the Blue Ridge Road interchange. That would be a new interchange off of I-40 in Black Mountain. The third project would be the Wilma-Dykeman Greenway extension. That would extend the City of Asheville's Greenway network north from the current Wilma-Dykeman Greenway in the River Arts District to Pearson Road Bridge and tie in with DOT's planned improvements on Riverside Drive. Number 4 is another bike ped project. That's Beaverview Road. That was a project that was funded in P5.0. That's currently in as a sidewalk in West Asheville on Beaverview Road. There's some considerations being made to look at potentially changing that to a side path. But either way, bike ped improvements with local match. The fifth is, it's currently classified as highway. It's likely to change to bike ped. That's the Craven Street Bridge improvements being headed up by the City of Asheville. The current design concept for that is looking at a standalone bicycle and pedestrian bridge parallel to the current Craven Street Bridge to connect the Greenway network. Project number 6 is one that we have talked about a ton at the MPO, and that is the Amboy Meadow Road corridor. So that would be going from I-240 over to Biltmore Avenue. And looking at modernizing the road, addressing some of the congestion bottlenecks along the corridor, and elongating the multimodal infrastructure to connect the River Arts District with some of these other areas. The number 7 project is the Sardis Sandhill Road corridor. That is currently programmed as a widening, again, all of these are in Buncombe County, that would be looking from NC 191 to Smoky Park Highway, another high growth area, and looking at widening to multi-lanes through the corridor and adding multimodal infrastructure. The 8th project is the Swananoa River Road corridor. That is the project from Biltmore Avenue to South Tunnel Road. It's currently programmed for widening, but the design concept moving forward looks at a lot of resiliency measures, given the flooding along this corridor, as well as tying in the Swananoa Greenway from the City of Asheville. One thing I want to note on this is we had a lot of robust discussion, especially given the recent bicyclist fatality in this project area. And you know, one of the main reasons why this was not higher on the list is due to where it project development. A preliminary design was only recently agreed to on this corridor. Then this corridor is going to have a lot of steps in the design process. A lot of these other projects are considerably further along in design. And to note, Amboy Road, Meadow Road held a public meeting, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. So that is a note that we would pass on to NCDOT. The reason this project is ranked lower is primarily due to project development concerns, not because of the importance of this project.
Could you speak to how we got our ranking? Because we did have meetings with NCDOT, then the local stakeholders, then prioritization, and then PCC. So it's not arbitrary that these numbers were just ranked.
Right, there's a lot of steps. First is NCDOT provided what's called the seniority rank. That was a preliminary ranking they gave that basically gave greater weight to projects that have been funded for a longer time. That was used as a starting point. DOT provided their own rankings, which both of our divisions differed from the seniority rank. And then we held meetings with the division and local stakeholders with Division 13 and 14 to talk about how we want to rank these projects, and that changed the rankings yet again. And then that went through prioritization, the TCC, and today the board.
Kim has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I just kind of to, I guess, hitch my cart to that horse, is to ask a little bit more about not just the ranking, but the deprioritization, because Swananoa River Road started out, I thought, either at or near the top. So can we speak a little bit about how we got to it falling to the bottom?
Sure. Yeah, so I believe this project started towards the top, again, based on the seniority rank. So this project has been on the tip and stick for quite some time. Really, again, is what kind of brought this project further down the list is the project development considerations. So Amboy Meadow, well, to start at the top, Mills Gap already has right-of-way acquired. The Blue Ridge Road interchange, I believe, is very, very close to implementation. We heard from local stakeholders, primarily the city, that having the bike ped projects closer to the top was a preference. So those 3 projects, Beaverview Road, Craven Street, and the Wilma Dyson Extension, moved up the list. And then Amboy Meadow and Sardis Sand Hill were a little bit further along in terms of project development. Well, I shouldn't say a little, especially Amboy Meadow, considerably further along. And just as a reminder, the Amboy Meadow project is something that we talked about for over at least a year straight at this MPO. DOT initially envisioned that as a 4-lane divided highway through Asheville. After a long time of discussion, that was narrowed down to a 2-lane section with multimodal and some pretty significant intersection improvements to address those bottlenecks. And also, something the division brought up is that the Amboy Meadow project ties in with Section A of the I-26 connector. And so that's a project that has had a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, and again, has already been through public input, had a public meeting, and so that was the justification for having that a little bit higher. Sardis and Sand Hill Road, somewhat similar. That's a high growth corridor where a concept has been a little bit more developed than Swananoa. Swananoa has, as of right now, the current concept would be looking at potentially moving the road. So moving Swananoa River Road out of the floodplain and the floodway to the other side of the buildings along that corridor, and then utilizing the current road for driveway access to those parcels so that those don't become full takings, as well as utilizing the rest of the space to serve as the Swananoa Greenway. That is a very, very big project, essentially building a new road. And with the context of that project, it is almost definitely going to be going through the merger process, which means environmental agencies will be part of the design process and be required on signing off on the permitting of this project. So with those considerations, and given the fact that only recently is there really a concept that folks are okay with moving forward on, that was the primary reasoning for Swananoa being further down the list. But Hannah or anyone else who's there, feel free to chime in on some of the discussion.
I definitely appreciate that, Tristan, and especially because, you know, we've been having these conversations ongoing for years, and it helps to be able to have this conversation, even if it's reiterated at this level. I appreciate the recognition of the recent fatal accident or incident involving a cyclist. I know that DOT understands the severity of safety issues, but what I'm hearing is just kind of like confirming where this happens, not just in this project, but where feasibility becomes the higher named priority. And that's why we see so many of our roads where it comes to like equitable access or safety, it becomes too expensive to address them and too hard to address them. And I'm not sure that deprioritizing them like matches how we get there, even though we're talking about like negative funding for this. So I guess for me, I still don't hear where like the percentage of our safety metric is fitting into this. But I do understand is that Amboy Road's connection to the I-26 connector is yet another example where interstates get a higher priority in our community, and that's why I'm just like having a really hard time reconciling supporting Swananoa River Road falling to the bottom. I know it's going to be hard. I know there's going to be a lot of steps in between, but it's like even with the recent safety issues, it's an ongoing serious problem. Not to mention if it like crumbles into the river.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great point, but I mean, it's, I would point out that the Amboy Meadow Road connection would help feed into the Swananoa River area and provide some pretty significant safety benefits as well. I mean, I think the hard thing with this is that all of these are needs. I mean, we've gone through years as an MPO helping to prioritize these projects, have local discussions, have regional discussions about these projects. All of these are needed projects. All of these have been signed off by some form or another of this body as needed projects. And yeah, having to go through this ranking is certainly not easy, especially given that we don't know for sure what will happen. You know, some projects, you know, being further down the list increases the likelihood of projects being significantly delayed or potentially cut, but we don't know for sure until we see the results of this exercise.
What our big discussion and prioritization was is that all these need to be ranked number one, right? So it becomes very difficult picking, and the way we ranked them was how far along are they? Will they be successful in getting completed, or do you rank something that's higher priority per se, but isn't as far along in the process and at risk losing both of the project? Right.
If it's all right, I'll move into the Division 14 list. And there's plenty more lists, folks. No shortage of those.
I like that we're stopping after each list to discuss.
Yeah, I think that's good. So Division 14, that's Haywood and Henderson County projects. The number one project was the widening of NC 191. Again, right-of-way has been required. The number two project that is, again, to point out, and apologies for the delay on that, that was changed at the TCC. The number two project would be White Street, again, given kind of the right-of-way getting underway, and it's tied in with another project in Hendersonville on South Main Street. And so that bumped the Four Seasons Boulevard interchange down a spot. Again, that project is a little bit further out, so that was the primary consideration there. And we coordinated with the City of Hendersonville and NCDOT Division 14 on that change. The fourth project is South Main Street in Waynesville. We know from the past that this is Waynesville's number one priority, and it's calling it, there's a section that's a widening, but there's a lot of sections that are really just bringing the road up to standards and improving the bike ped infrastructure. Number five is the 1923 project stretching from exit 37 in Buncombe County at Wiggins Road over to Chestnut Mountain Road. So that goes by Chestnut Mountain Park, and that would modernize the road and provide a side path connection through there. Number six project is the intersection realignment of Crimes Cove and Raccoon Road. That's just outside of Waynesville. It's a bit of a disjointed intersection with a pretty high level of crashes. Number seven is the bike ped project. That's Grove Street. That's the City of Hendersonville's number one priority. That would be putting sidewalks in from Barnwell Street over to Spartanburg Highway, so helping to provide a connection between downtown and the growing Spartanburg Highway corridor. And number eight would be Blight Street. That's on the west side of Hendersonville. And that's another sidewalk project that was number two priority for the city. And the ninth project is Russ Avenue in Haywood County. Not the Russ Avenue that's currently under construction, but the project that is considerably further out that would go from the Smoky Park or the Smoky Mountain Expressway up to Delwood Road. That is one of the more recently funded projects, so that was one of the primary considerations there. Any questions or comments on the Division 14 list?
This was one that has lots of comments as well, but I think all of them need to be number one. But I think with how far along items are in the process, that I'm sure Kevin and I would want South Main Street to be number one, but that's not going to happen because other things are kind of open. So. Okay, so moving from there, we'll go to the Region G, Regional Impact, and I'm going to tag in Hannah Smith at this point because this is one that had quite a bit of movement over the last few weeks, few months. But all in all, the prioritization subcommittee was pretty firm that the number one regional impact project should be South Main Street in Hendersonville. That is a bridge widening intersection improvement project that ties in with the Acoustic Trail in Hendersonville. And that is being developed in conjunction with the White Street realignment. The number two project would be Section A, or Section AC of the I-26 connector in Buncombe County. And from there, we'll get into the A10 project. So, Hannah, can I tag you in at this point?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to move backwards a little bit and then reiterate some things that Tristan's already said. And then we'll get to ATN updates. There's a handful of folks that have gotten to hear me give this presentation like 4 times, so they could probably give it for me at this point. So we'll just jump right in. So we've talked a lot about negative funding availability and no new projects, so that means no new projects are coming from P7, but I kind of wanted to back up and talk about how we even get those figures before we talk about what they mean. So there's really 4 primary components to how we determine funding availability for those 22 funding categories. So we start with our initial allocation, and this is just based on our latest revenue forecast, and it does include both state and federal revenue. The second component is inflation. So our entire 10-year document for the STIP is programmed in today's dollars. So the right-of-way estimate that's in year 8, 9, and 10 is today's dollars. So how we account for inflation for these projects is we take inflation off the top of our initial allocation. And the North Carolina Board of Transportation voted in May, their May meeting, on how to account for inflation, and they approved using a 5% compounded annually for the first 5 years of the program, and then a flat $500 million per year for the second half of the program. The third component is the variance adjustment, and this can be positive or negative, just depends. We also have referred to this in the past as the look back law. So essentially what we do is we look all the way back to 2016 when we implemented STI in the first STIP development, and we look at by fiscal year a comparison of what was budgeted versus what was actually spent. If we've overspent, then we have to account for that. Yep. If we have underspent, then we still, that money rolls over. So an example I've used at the TCC was, if say we get 100 million this year, if we only spend 80, we get 120 million next year, but it works in reverse of that too. If you overspend, if we spend 130 this year, in year 2, you can only program 70. So basically it's just a running balance all the way back to 2016. And so that could be a positive or negative depending on the funding category. And then the fourth component for determining that funding availability is the amount of committed projects that are in the 2026 to 2035. And this is a deduction. So this is basically the same thing that Tristan had in his graphic with the triangle and the line to the STIP. But essentially, we look at the total amount programmed on all projects in the current STIP except the non-committed and the unfunded. So a reminder, committed means right-of-way or construction is programmed in the first 5 years. Non-committed means right-of-way or construction is first programmed in the second half, so years 6 through 10. And then unfunded is there's no right-of-way or construction in the entire 10-year document. Typically, it means the project used to be funded and got delayed to the point of being unfunded altogether. So this isn't just our committed projects that are selected through prioritization. Within the STI law, there's also alternate criteria projects. So this is interstate maintenance, bridge, and safety projects. The MPO's discretionary projects or the STBGDA projects come off of this, as well as the economic development projects, which we don't have any in the STIP in our region. So these are just graphs of those bullet points, doing kind of the math for us. So statewide mobility, just keep in mind also, these are funding availability as of May of this year. So we're, what, 4 months later now? So these are only a snapshot in time. I tell everybody they're really only good for the week you get them, because the next week that we get a cost increase on a project, the numbers are already old. So the statewide mobility tier, as of May, there was about $1 billion available for new projects in P7. I think statewide we programmed maybe 12 or 13 projects. And as Tristan mentioned earlier, none of them were in our region. Tristan also mentioned earlier that the regional funding is split up by population. We are the second smallest region, so we get the second smallest available funding. Again, we take inflation off the top, and this is a percentage, the 5% for the first 5 years, and then the 500 million compounded annually. But we take the inflation off the top, and then this third column again is that look back. So what this means for Region G is that since 2016, at about $68 million that we were allocated but never spent. So we get that added back to our available funding. But then when we hit the amount of committed projects in our current STIP, we're going over, because of the cost of those projects, we're going over our available revenue. So that's how we get that negative 191 million that we've been seeing now for quite a while. Again, this was as of May. So that negative has probably, well, it definitely has increased, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then division needs, we all get the same allocation per division, and as such, the same amount of inflation taken off the top. If you look at Division 13, since 2016, essentially how you read this is we had 130 million unspent, so that gets added in. But if you account for the committed projects, again, our committed project costs are exceeding our available revenue, so we're back in the negative for Division 13. Division 14, as of May, had some available revenue for P7 projects, but again, snapshot in time, I'm sure this figure has changed as well. Wanted to talk really quick about cost estimate increases. We are continually updating estimates in the STIP. We want to make sure we don't have any estimates that are greater than 2 years old. So we updated estimates for the committed statewide projects back in the spring before the STIP unit programmed that $1 billion worth of new projects. We've been working on regional impact project estimate updates this summer so that the STIP has new estimates when they're programming the regional impact projects in September. And then we'll be doing the same thing for our division needs projects in the fall. And so again, we expect the negative for Region G and Division 13 to go, further negative by the time the draft STIP is, by the time the Region G and the division needs projects are actually being programmed. So again, we kind of already did this exercise, but for the STI funding categories that are in the negative, we've already know no new projects for P7 will be funded. All of the non-committed projects will be unfunded. So essentially, again, non-committed years 6 through 10. They move out more than likely of the program. I want to kind of point out this doesn't have any necessarily impacts as far as reprioritization. Non-committed projects and unfunded projects both have to recompete in prioritization. The only difference here is a non-committed project that's programmed in years 6 through 10, we can work on preliminary engineering. But if a project is unfunded, we're more than likely not working on planning or engineering. And then committed projects will be delayed. Some of them may be delayed to the point of being decommitted. So not unfunded altogether, but decommitted, meaning we'll have to recompete for right-of-way and construction funds and prioritization. Meaning we can continue engineering work, but the right-of-way and construction funding will no longer be committed. So for those STI categories where project schedule delays are going to be needed because of this lack of funding availability, that's why we're given this opportunity to provide input into the process. And so, I kind of went backwards to tell you about what we've already done today, but I kind of wanted to paint a full picture. So now I want to move into some recent updates for A10. I want to start with how it's currently programmed in the current 2024 to 2033 STIP. Currently, it is for 1923 from Broadway, which is exit 25, to Weaver Boulevard, exit 19. And the design that is currently being carried forward, for detailed study, is a widened to 8 lanes from Broadway to Newstock, and then widened to 6 lanes from Newstock to Weaver Boulevard. The schedule is the planning document June of next year, right of way July 2027, and construction January 2031. And the total cost as in the current STIP is $323 million. We did, however, get a new cost estimate in April of this year that has the project coming in at $670 million. So that's about a $350 million increase. And before I go on any further, I have been sharing openly, this is not 100% inflation. We noticed in October of last year when we initiated updating the estimates for A10 that we were not accounting for the work between New Stock and US 2570 or Weaver Boulevard. So that $323 million that was programmed in the current STIP was only accounting for Broadway to New Stock, and there were all of the quantities and the work associated with New Stock to exit 19 were not in there. And so part of this substantial increase is just adding in scope that should have been there all along and was omitted by mistake. And then I'm sure there is a percentage of it that is due to inflation. So to point out that 191 million, that's a snapshot in the negative as of May, does not include this $350 million increase for A10 and Region G. So we're really, in all actuality, we're looking at probably 500 million in the red for Region G. So we at Division have proposed, because of this cost increase, to further divide the A10AA project into 4 segments. And we have them listed here as what we propose, and they are in priority order as far as Division feels. And kind of the idea here is we don't want A10 in its entirety to be delayed as a whole to the point where we can't keep some piece of it committed in a STIP as a result of this cost estimate increase. So what we're proposing is these 4 segments, the first one being a bridge project that's currently in the STIP, which is the bridge over Old Marshall Highway. It's about 1,500 feet south of the New Stock interchange, so we would be adding those 2 together. The New Stock interchange itself would be the new bridge that's widened to the future laneage that's proposed, the new ramps, all of the complete streets components on New Stock and Merriman Avenue in the interchange area, as well as climbing lanes on 1923 in this stretch, so that we could get some additional capacity in this area ahead of the full widening. The second one that we're proposing, did somebody try to ask something? Heard some feedback. Okay. The second one is the Broadway interchange, and this is really to finish up where the connector is tying in. Final improvements to Riverside Drive, which completely relocates the intersection of Broadway and Riverside Drive to a new location, connecting final location for the complete streets elements being finished out there on Broadway and the north end of Riverside Drive, the new ramps for the interchange, as well as potentially the bridges on 1923 as well, or future 26. So there's complete streets needs in this area, there's interchange needs in this area, so we felt that was would be the second priority for the A10 project. The third would just be the remaining interchanges lumped together. We'd like to upgrade these interchanges, Elk Mountain, Merriman Ave, and Weaver Boulevard. And this would just include enough mainline work to tie the new ramps into the existing roadway for merging. And then the last would be the remaining widening. So, or anything that is not built fully out in priorities 1 through 3. And just to kind of give you a couple notes about the costs, this first segment, and again, this is interchange, but a decent amount of work on 1923 as well, is about 172 million of that 670. The Broadway interchange is about 63 million of the 670, and we're still working to break the estimate further down for these last 2 what amount of this 670 pays for the interchanges versus the widening. That's still under development. We're sort of getting it back this week though, so hopefully we can share that, but definitely the STIP will have it for the upcoming program. So essentially, I want to show this schedule so we can tie this together as while we're even talking about this. Local input points that we voted on earlier are due to the STIP unit by the end of the month. This ranking is as well, because the first 3 weeks of September, the STIP unit is programming the regional impact projects. So what we would like to do, and I'll kick it back to Tristan, we are tasked with ranking our Region G projects that are committed in priority order, but we would like to go ahead and break A10AA into these 4 segments and then rank the 4 segments amongst the remaining Region G projects as well. That way the STIP unit has it in September for programming, and we don't have to do it after the draft STIP comes out. We can do it while it's being developed. Happy to take any questions about these segments, why we thought these were the priorities, anything I've covered, but otherwise kick it back to Tristan to carry us through the Region G ranking.
Any questions for Hannah? Okay.
Thank you, Hannah. So the last ranking sheet that we have, the TCC recommendation, again, South Main Street in Hendersonville is number 1. Section AC of the I-26 connector, that's the I-40 to Haywood Road stretch, number 2. And the number 3 priority would be that first section of A10. That's the New Stock Road interchange. And Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, as well as the climbing lanes in that section where there's steeper grades?
Yes, and the complete streets improvements under the interchange and all the way out to Merriman Ave.
Perfect. Follow that, number 4 would be the remaining section of Sweet Creek Road. That's the section between Mills Gap and Rock Hill Road that is slated for a widening. Number 5 would be the Broadway interchange as part of the A10 project. Number 6 would be the remaining interchanges on the A10 corridor. And number 7 would be the remaining mainline widening of Future 26. So those were the recommended rankings from the TCC for Region G projects for your guys' review. So,
and I want to clarify one thing, because we put A10AE, A10AD, A10AF. Those don't exist yet. We just use that naming convention for the purpose of this exercise. The STIP unit will determine what those new segments, and the description will be a bit more thorough as well. But I wanted to point out that that doesn't necessarily match the cost. We're just copying in the total cost still until we can get the new estimates per segment. But I will say again, the new stock was about 173 million, and Broadway, I think it was 63 million, and the last 2 are still under development. So that 323 is tied to what's currently programmed in the STIP for A10 as a whole.
Thank you, Hannah. You answered my question before I asked. Any other discussion about this? Does everyone agree with breaking this project apart? There was lots of discussions on which pieces to put where, and that was where we really wanted your input to see if this met everyone's expectations.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it includes the complete street improvements under the bridge and out Merriman Avenue, And it also makes sense that you wouldn't actually do the Broadway when considering the fact that it's going to change so much until that, the new Clifton Park Bridge, I guess, is completely started and on its way and figured out.
We don't like doing work to be undone.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, I will entertain motions. Harris, so moved. Larry Harris to accept the recommendations for the ranking. Do you have a second?
Second. Second, Cordell.
Sure.
Asheville, Kimroni,
I have my hand raised. I have a clarifying question. Are we voting on all three of the reprioritizations together?
Yes. Yes.
Then my vote is no.
Understood, I appreciate that.
Black Mountain, Archie Portiller,
Aye.
Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards, Flat Rock, Ann Coletta,
Aye.
Dr. Jim Player,
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Inslee,
Aye.
Haywood County, Brandon Rogers, Henderson County, Bill Lapsley,
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall,
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley,
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta,
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wexel,
Aye.
Max Valley, Mike Evelyn,
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt,
Aye.
One Tree, Tom Whitmer,
Aye, and thank you for all the work everyone put into this.
Thank you, Tom.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris,
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton,
Aye.
Weaverville, Catherine Cordell, Woodfin, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you, everyone. I know that was, some of us, that may like the fourth or fifth time doing this, so thank you, everyone, for your input on this. As always, I'd like to say this is the end of the business section. So now we'll move on to the informational items. I know we're running a little bit longer than usual today because of that item, but I'm excited about the Merriman Avenue roadside report. It's, of all the projects, this is the one I hear the most about.
Just a quick introduction. Today we have Carrie Simpson from NCDOT to go over a recent report on some of the data that's been collected from the Merriman Avenue Road Diet Evaluation. And yes, this is one that picked up quite a bit of chatter. So to kind of go through the data findings, Carrie, I will hand it off to you.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yes, Carrie. Thank you.
How much time do I have?
If you could keep it to around 10 minutes, that'd be great.
Okay, I have a lot of slides, so I'll try to breeze through and because there's a lot of data to go over, but I'll be happy to, if anybody has questions afterwards, you can email me or, you know, whatever. But so I'll go ahead and get rolling. Yeah, so what's that?
I guarantee you'll have questions.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Carrie Simpson and I'm the NCDOT Safety Evaluation Engineer, working in our traffic safety unit, and we reside in Garner. And we were asked to compile some before and after data on Merriman Avenue that I'll cover today. So we looked at safety, mobility, and volume metrics, and we have been monitoring those and evaluating them. The safety metrics that we studied were total crashes, fatal and severe injury crashes, and bicycle and pedestrian crashes. And the mobility metrics that we have been studying are motor vehicle speeds and travel times. And finally, we've also looked at motor vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle volumes. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is just talking about the scope of our study period. So we collected data on site. We did some data through a system called ClearGuide that uses vehicle probe data to assess travel times on corridors. And then we also are using our crash data system that's called TEAS to look at crashes before and after. So let's see. All right. So we looked at the Merriman section that had the 4-to-3 lane conversion, but then we've also looked at some other corridors around it to try to assess mobility data, some speed and volume data, and crash data. So I'll cover that as well as what we have studied for the treated section of Merriman. And we are going to continue to monitor. There's plans to collect another round of data this fall. Okay, so I'll go ahead and jump into some of the results. So the safety data, crash data, has been generally positive, and this is looking at, we call it an initial 1.42 year after period because it's including some of the time when the roadway was under construction. But so far we have seen a 23% reduction in all crashes and a 30% reduction in injury and fatal. Well, there have been no fatal crashes before or after, so that would be a 30% reduction in injury crashes. And then we have also studied Merriman to the north and to the south of the area that was treated, and we have seen some slight reductions in crashes for those sections as well. We've looked at what the crash picture looks like before and after, and so far it appears that there's been a shifting of crash types, with the predominant crash types being rear end and frontal impact crashes. But there has been a reduction in frontal impacts, which would be crash types like head-ons, angle, left turning, and right turning crashes. But there has been an increase in rear end crashes. But frontal impact crashes are typically the ones that would lead to a higher severity. So that kind of aligns with what we're seeing, that we've seen a reduction in frontal impact crashes and which has led to a reduction in injuries. I mentioned earlier that we're also studying crashes associated with bicycles and pedestrians. And in a 5-year before period, there were 9 reported pedestrian crashes and 2 reported bicycle crashes, some of which resulted in, many of which resulted in injury. And in the initial after period, that we were studying, there was 1 reported pedestrian crash and 1 reported bicycle crash, both of which resulted in property damage only. Since the time of this study, which is a few months old, but we looked a little bit beyond that and pulled crash data through May of 2024, and we identified another bicycle crash on the section that resulted in a B injury. So in the data sets that we've looked at so far, there's been 1 reported pedestrian crash and 2 reported bicycle crashes after the conversion. And this is something that we'll continue to monitor and to assess what the impact is on the pedestrian and bicycle crashes. Oops, sorry. So we also looked at safety data on a few routes in the vicinity of Merriman. So we looked at crashes on Broadway, Kimberly, and Lakeshore. And what we have found so far is kind of minimal changes and crashes for those roadways. So it doesn't appear like there is a big shifting of crashes on those roadways. So there was a slight increase in total crashes on Broadway, no change in crashes on Kimberly, and a slight reduction on Lakeshore when we looked at crashes before and after. All right. So another metric that we looked at were speeds, and we had a firm go out, put tubes down, and collect spot speed studies at 5 locations on Merriman. 3 of them were in the conversion section, and then we also collected at a point north and south of the treatment. And there were minimal changes seen at the spot locations on Merriman outside of the treatment area. And we looked at average speeds and 85th percentile speeds. And when we compared the spot speed studies that were collected in fall of 20, I'm sorry, I think that is that right? Fall of 22 to October of 23. The speeds showed the average speeds dropped by about 3 to 5 miles per hour, and the 85th percentile speeds dropped by about 3 to 6 mile per hour on the conversion section. And in the after period, the 85th percentile speeds were about 32 to 36 miles per hour. And then when we looked at speeds to the north and south that weren't treated on Merriman, the average and 85th percentile speeds dropped by about 1 mile per hour. Let's see. So we also collected spot speed data at 2 points on Broadway, and the average and 85th percentile speeds had increased by 1 miles per hour, with the after period 85th percentile speed being about 46 to 47 miles per hour on Broadway. And spot speed data was also collected on a number of other city streets by the city of Asheville. And for all of those routes, the average speeds changed marginally by about no change to 2 miles per hour. And another metric that we collected was volume data. So on the 4 to 3 lane conversion section, we saw a slight drop in motor vehicle traffic, an increase in bicycle traffic, and mixed results for pedestrian volumes. So we looked at 3 mid-block points for volumes on the conversion section, and the average daily volume was down by anywhere from 1 to 8%. So it equated to a few hundred vehicles to 1,000, 2,000 vehicles that were down, comparing the after period to the before period. And then just to the north and south of the treatment section, there were drops in the total vehicle volume of 1 to 4%. And then motor vehicle volumes were also collected at 2 points on Broadway, and the average daily volumes were up by 6 to 11%, which equated to 700 to 900 vehicles per day. So it appears that some of the traffic that was reduced on Merriman may have been diverted to Broadway. And motor vehicle volumes were also collected on a number of other city streets by Asheville, and most showed an increase in the average daily traffic, ranging from like 5 to 16%. And of the city streets, the highest increase was on Kimberly, where there was an additional 600 to 900 vehicles per day. So in addition to motor vehicle volumes, we were also assessing pedestrian and bicycle volumes. And pedestrian volumes were collected at 12 different points on the conversion section. And there was variability with some showing increases and some showing decreases in pedestrian volumes. But a big factor in this, I think, is that there was rainfall during some of the after data collection that probably played a role in some of the decreases. So over the whole data collection effort in October of 2023, there were 1,900 pedestrians observed, and that's compared to 2,200 in September of 2022. And then at the same time, bicycle volumes were assessed, and despite having rainfall during some of the after observations, there was still an increase in bicycle volumes at almost all of the data collection points, with the most increase being seen at the northern end of the treatment section. There was one point where bicycle volumes had increased by over 200%, which was an increase of 35 bicyclists over a 2-day count. So we collected 700 bicyclist observations in the after period as compared to 400 in the before period. And then the last metric that we looked at for bicyclists using the roadway was whether or not they were riding in the roadway. And we saw that there was a dramatic increase in bicyclists using the roadway, where in September of 2022, there were 28% of bicyclists traveling on the roadway, with the majority traveling on the sidewalk before. And then in the after period, we saw that 82% of bicyclists were now traveling in the roadway in the bicycle lanes. I have a few more slides here. So we also looked at travel time data using ClearGuide, which I said is using probe data to make this assessment of travel times. And the average travel time data on the conversion section did generally show an increase in average travel times, with the highest increases in the PM peak hours when comparing fall before and after periods. And also the slowest average speeds in the northbound direction occurred at 10:15 in the AM and 4:35 in the PM. That's northbound. And then southbound, the slowest times on average were 8:15 in the AM and 5:30 in the PM. And we looked at the corridor speeds for a whole 4-mile section of Merriman, so including the 4 to 3 lane conversion and the area to the north and south. And what we saw was that in the northbound direction, there was actually a reduction in average travel times in the morning and midday, but there was an increase in the PM peak. And in the southbound direction, there was no change in the morning, and then slight increases in the midday and afternoon PM peak times. And part of the reason that you might see reductions or only slight increases is because the areas to the north and south actually saw improvements for the most part in average travel times. So where there might be some increases in the converted section, there were generally improvements in the rest of the corridor. So overall, it's showing pretty modest changes. And then I'm going to be pretty brief on this one, but we looked at mobility impacts on some of the adjacent corridors using the same ClearGuide system. And overall, we found pretty modest impacts when we looked at average travel times and degradation of some of the other facilities. So that was looking at I-26 and I-240, and then we also pulled the data for some of the other local streets around Merriman. So this is the last slide that I have, and I know I've really rushed through it, but the preliminary takeaways or conclusions so far from what we're seeing is that the safety data is generally positive. We're seeing reductions in reported crashes on Merriman Avenue. Motor vehicle speeds were reduced on the conversion section by a few miles per hour. Volume data showed an increase in bicycle traffic and mixed results for the pedestrians, but we will conduct another round of after volume data, and we'll make sure that we get days where there's not going to be rain, so we can get a good after data set. And then travel time data generally showed an increase in average travel times on the 4 to 3 lane conversion section, but Merriman to the north and south generally showed reduced travel time. So when you consider the whole 4-mile Merriman corridor, average travel times increase relatively minimally by 2 to 14 seconds. And then adjacent routes appear to have minimal changes to their average speeds and travel times. There appears to be some diversion of motor vehicle traffic when we looked at the ADT, the traffic trends between Merriman and some of the adjacent routes, with a slight drop in volume for the conversion section and an increase in some of the other routes. But safety data for the routes that we looked at suggests that there so far has not been a substantial migration of crashes, particularly for injury crashes. And like I have said several times, this is considered a preliminary data set, and we're going to do some additional monitoring and evaluation with additional data sets being collected this fall. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Carrie. Does anyone have any questions for Carrie? I love referring people to this report. They're saying I spend 5 extra minutes. Yeah. But
yeah, I'll say we had one exchange of, we've been trying to track some of this data as well. And one thing to note is that I think people have forgotten is that before the pandemic, this road was terrible. If anyone tells me it was nice to drive on this road before the pandemic, you were lying through your teeth. But I do think that, given the timing of this project, this was a project that happened kind of as travel was picking back up. And so I do think that, a lot of the concerns about congestion as an impact of the road diet, to me, you can see the uptick happening as this project happened. But I think what this data shows is, there were impacts along the corridor, but I mean, this corridor could have stayed the same, and there would have been congestion anyway, and we wouldn't have gotten the safety benefits that we did. So I think this is really, really important to look at and evaluate projects, especially afterwards, so that we can really see what the benefits were, and not just go by, well, I didn't experience traffic, or I did experience traffic. It's good to have hard data. So, Carrie, thank you so much.
Thank you. And we've included links to the presentation and your email address.
All right, sounds good.
On the next page. Yes. Next is the Maggie Valley Pedestrian Improvement Project.
All right. share my screen. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
All right, great. Yeah, this will be fairly quick. So just start throwing another ray of sunshine into the dark financial storm that we've been discussing, showing that there's alternative ways to fund projects. And so this is about the pedestrian improvements in Maggie Valley. And if I can get my slide to advance. All right, the problem there is like it's 5-lane cross section. Same problems we see at 5-lane cross sections in pretty much all of our.
Yeah, Steve, we're still seeing your first slide, and yeah, we see the whole slide deck. So you might need to go to the slideshow, current slide.
While he's doing that, Maggie Valley did just have a big celebration of, I forget how many years, 70 years in town. So.
How's that? Is that?
That's much better, yeah.
Okay, you seeing the slide that says problem on it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So 5-lane cross section, the same problems that we see at pretty much all of our 5-lane cross sections. There's a whole lot of pavement there. It leads to high speeds for motorized vehicles, and it's difficult for pedestrians to cross. If you've been to Maggie Valley, you know that there's lots of businesses, tourist attractions, parks, churches, and such on both sides of the corridor. So really need to, there's a problem for pedestrians to cross. This project goes from Moody Farm Road, which is real near Parham Park, up to Phi Top Road, which is kind of the most dense part of the corridor as far as businesses and such go. Desired outcomes of this project, of course, provide multimodal accommodations and to calm traffic. There's the discussion about what to do with this corridor has been ongoing for several years, and there was actually a study conducted that recommended a road diet. And then, of course, anytime you have a 5-lane, then the access management discussion comes into play. Through collaboration with the town and local input, we found out that those first two, the road diet or access management, there just really wasn't an appetite for either one of those. So it's what was settled on was a project that would have pedestrian crossings, median refuges, and flashing beacons. Funding for this project came from state transportation block grant direct allocation funds. The MPO submitted the application for that. And the initial estimate total was $2,075,000. And that was based on the road option for the corridor. You can see some figures there. You'll notice that everything doesn't quite add up. There were some other funding sources from FHWA and some flex funding through DOT that came into play there. And as part of the requirements for SDBDGA funds, there's a 20% match. This is a locally administered project, and it was managed by Division 14. Those of you that went to the training last week with MPO about locally administered projects know that there's a 10% fee on top of that for DOT to manage the project, and that's management is all through the design and the construction process. The project has 14 pedestrian crosses in that corridor. 7 of them have flashing beacons, and then 7 of them are just your typical high visibility crosswalks with the median refuge. Not all of them have a median refuge. There's a few that don't. That was dictated by the town, and it just had to do with access into businesses, or in one spot it's a church and such. The median would have blocked access. There's vegetation in all the medians. It's low growing and low maintenance vegetation. And there were many revisions to the plans, again, kind of driven by the town, identifying places where we might need to shift the median to allow access to a particular business. All right, so this is one of the first crossings that has the flashing beacons that you can see. AD compliant curb ramps. As we mentioned, you can actuate the beacons from either the sidewalk on the side or from the island in the middle. The landscaping in some places really just kind of fell into the landscaping that was or blended into the landscaping that businesses have on the side. Again, medians with the refuge island, push buttons that can be actuated from there or the sidewalk. And this is one of the crosswalks that does not have a flashing beacon. The reason they all don't have flashing beacons is there just wasn't enough money to put 14 flashing beacons. So the town identified, they identified all the crosswalk locations in general, but then they also identified the spots that needed the flashing beacons because they just had more pedestrian traffic there. But these that don't have flashing beacons, you still have the high visibility crosswalks, the high visibility signage, and the yield bars. Tied into some of the already existing greenway trails and parks. Again, just one of the ones that does not have a flashing beacon. You can see the high vis signage. All of them have the stamped brick is stamped asphalt is what it is to increase visibility. And this is the very last one up towards Phi Top Road, flashing beacon crossing. The final cost came out to be $2,051,000, slightly under the initial estimate. Again, which the initial estimate was based on the road diet option. And just kind of the takeaway from this project is this was a very successful collaboration of years of discussion, as we mentioned earlier, with the MPO, Town of Maggie Valley, Division 14. There was a very flexible process in the design and construction, kind of driven by the town. We were able to deliver 17 of those crossings, and also had an effect to calm motor vehicle traffic just because of the high visibility nature of those crossings. Told you it'd be quick. So does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Steve? Thank you, Steve. I've driven through there. It looks really great.
Thanks, y'all.
Just to point out, I think that one thing we kind of struggle with is getting MPO funding to projects in some of our smaller jurisdictions. And this, to me, is a successful model of how we can hopefully do that for more and more projects in the future. Absolutely.
Next is Division 13 updates.
Yep. I'm going to keep it really brief this month. You guys have the reports for all of our active construction in Buncombe and Madison, as well as our project development, which is basically just a printout of the STIP date. But just one thing I wanted to touch on construction really quick. Just one project is the I-40 work that's been going on. We do have 5 more interstate closures planned, 1 more eastbound to finish the bridge deck overlays for eastbound, and that's tentatively scheduled for this weekend. And then they're going to switch back to westbound, which is where they started, and they'll have 4 more closures for westbound and they're anticipating being done with all 5 of those before winter shutdown. So we're going to keep sending out the press releases. I think the MPO gets those and sends them on out to the TCC and board, but just keep that in mind. We're looking at 5 more closures of I-40 the rest of the summer or the fall. Rest of these, not much new to add. One other I will mention, I-40 exit 53A, that acceleration lane that we have installed. I believe they're pretty much done. They're just lacking final pavement markings and markers and signage, and they're likely going to be done with that project in the next week or 2. So that was a long time coming. Excited to see that one on the ground, but that's really it for me. I'm happy to take questions though.
Thank you so much. There was this late, you can just say Interstate 26 if there's something going on there. So thank you, Ham. Next is Division 14 update.
All right, that's me again. I'll keep this brief too in the interest of time. These are the same projects you've been seeing for a while. The I-40 bridges, that's the 3rd project down there in Haywood County. There are 2 lanes open in each direction, but keep in mind that the other 2 bridges, one at Fines Creek and Pigeon River, that supplemental agreement has been entered into for those bridges. So they'll be starting construction, so more disruption in that area. The I-26 project there in Henderson County, it's actually most of the concrete pavement structure is in place and very near being ready to open to 3 lanes. That won't be happening for a while, but it is getting close. Henderson County, the same projects that you've been seeing for a while. We'll move on to project development unless somebody has questions on the construction. All right. Project development side of things, a couple of changes since these updates were, since we updated this. The 3 bridges there in Haywood County, one over Beaver Dam Road, the other over Incinerator Road, and then the one over NC 215. Those have all been let and contracts have been awarded. So you'll be seeing those come off of here and move on to the construction update next month. And all the schedules on here are holding except for bridges, and bridges in both Haywood and Henderson County have been moved out. Some of them 6 months, some of them up to 6 years. And that's all due to balancing the budget. Otherwise, for now, the STIP projects schedules are holding, but as has been discussed today, those will probably be changing when the draft STIP comes out. Any questions?
Any questions for Steve? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Next is the Transportation Planning Branch. Daniel's on, but is someone from that department on?
I think they dropped off.
They dropped off, okay. And next is Federal Highway.
No, formal big updates or anything, but I do want to say we have hired 2 people in our office. So one is our discretionary grants program manager, and then we have discretionary grants program coordinator. We used to have just one, but we found that there are lots of projects and it's more than one person can handle. So they're starting this month, so they're both ready to go. They'll just be doing some training to get acclimated to their roles, and the projects, all the grant awards that are already existing, it's kind of been spread among us, and then any new ones are going to be going to them, and we'll probably feed some of the other ones to them. But if you check out our website, you just go FHWA directory, you'll see the names of our new program folks. So that's it.
Guessing that's a relief for you guys.
Yes, it is. But they're actually internal hires, so now it's builders.
That's good and bad.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Next is subcommittee work group reports. That's update.
I'll be brief. FBRMPO. Thanks for everyone who attended. I put a link in the chat to our website that has a link to a survey. So if you haven't done so already, please take the survey. If you can help getting the word out about that, that would be great. But I'll leave it at that. But I do want to mention we are very happy to have Daisy O'Connor join our staff as our transportation planner too. Daisy is no stranger to this region. So we are very excited. And if you haven't noticed already, our social media is already posting more than quarterly. Hopefully we'll be getting a few more hits and more engagement on that end.
Can I make a quick comment?
Oh, yes, please make Hellbender flow.
On September 26th, we're having our second annual Hellbender Regional Trail Gathering. Our keynote speaker is Matt Sledge. He's the director of the Upstate Greenways and Trails Alliance. You can register on our website. It's the first banner that pops up when you hit our landing page. It's free. It will be at the Mary C. Jenkins Community and Cultural Center in Brevard, starting at 9:30. And we've already sold 40 tickets, so they're flying off the shelf.
Hey, I will add to that, if you go to that facility and it's your first time going there, you probably need to use the big parking lot down at the park, because right in front of that building, there's probably only 10 or 13 spots for the ones that gets confused when they get there.
We are so excited to welcome Dave. Thank you. Topics for next meeting.
Knock on wood, it should be a light agenda, but just for your guys' heads up, we will be talking about division needs projects in September, so we'll be setting up those meetings in the next couple of weeks.
Do you have any public comments? No public comments? With that, we will adjourn.
Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you.